The letter came on a Tuesday. I remember that detail because Tuesdays were always my favorite day at the Oceanographic Research Station. The morning dive crews would bring up samples from the Monterey Canyon, and I'd spend hours cataloging marine specimens in the lab's pristine silence. It was methodical work, the kind that kept my hands busy and my mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Elena Vasquez found me hunched over a microscope, examining the cellular structure of a deep-sea anemone. Her reflection appeared in the lab's windows, distorted by the afternoon fog rolling in from the Pacific. "Kai," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you." I didn't look up immediately. In the 18 months I'd worked at the Monterey Bay Research Institute, unexpected visitors meant only one thing: my past had caught up with me again. Another journalist wanting to write about the woman who'd washed out of Navy SEAL training. Another documentary filmmaker fascinated by failure. "Tell them I'm not interested," I said, adjusting the microscope's focus. The anemone's tentacles came into sharp relief, perfect, purposeful, designed by millions of years of evolution to survive in the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. "It's Admiral Rebecca Morrison." My hands went still on the microscope controls. Admiral Morrison, the woman who'd commanded my SEAL training class. The woman who'd delivered the news that ended my military career with 4 simple words: "You're not ready, Chun." I straightened slowly, my reflection joining Elena's in the window. At 28, I still looked like the naive kid who'd walked into basic underwater demolition SEAL training 3 years ago. Compact frame, built for swimming. Black hair that fought every attempt to stay regulation length. Amber eyes that my grandmother insisted came from our Taiwanese ancestors' mountain-dwelling spirits. But the confidence was gone. That bright certainty that I could do anything, be anything, had been ground away grain by grain on the beaches of Coronado. "What does she want?" I asked. Elena's expression was carefully neutral. She didn't say, but she's waiting in conference room B. I found Admiral Morrison standing with her back to the door, studying a massive photograph of the Monterey Canyon's underwater terrain. She wore civilian clothes, dark slacks and a navy blazer, but her posture remained unmistakably military. Ramrod straight, hands clasped behind her back, silver hair pulled into a regulation bun despite her retirement 2 years prior. "Beautiful work," she said without turning around. "Dr. Vasquez tells me you've been instrumental in mapping the canyon's thermal vent systems, Admiral." I stepped into the room but remained near the door, leaving myself an exit. This is unexpected. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She turned then, and I was struck by how much she'd aged. The woman who'd seemed invincible during my training now showed the weight of decades and service lines around her eyes. A slight stoop to her shoulders that spoke of too many classified briefings and sleepless nights. "Sit down, Kai." It wasn't a request. I took the chair across from her, muscle memory forcing my spine straight despite my civilian clothes. "How have you been?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. In all our interactions during training, Admiral Morrison had never asked about my well-being. SEAL instructors weren't paid to care about feelings. "Fine," I said. "The research work is fulfilling." She nodded, studying my face with the same intensity she'd once used to evaluate my performance during Hell Week. "You look tired." I was tired. Bone deep, soul-weary tired in a way that 18 months of peaceful research couldn't cure. But I wasn't about to admit that to the woman who'd crushed my dreams. "Was there something you needed, Admiral?" She reached into her blazer and withdrew a manila envelope, placing it carefully on the conference table between us. My name was written across the front in precise block letters. 3 days ago, There was an incident in the South China Sea, she began. A joint training exercise between the U.S. and Philippine navies. Routine stuff: anti-piracy drills, maritime interdiction, search and rescue scenarios. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. During the final day of exercises, Admiral David Kellerman's command vessel came under attack by unknown assailants. Small boat raid, fast, coordinated, professional. Admiral Kellerman was taken hostage. My stomach dropped. Admiral Kellerman had been Morrison's successor as head of Naval Special Warfare Command. A good man, according to everyone who'd served under him. More importantly, he was one of the few flag officers who'd publicly supported integrating women into SEAL teams. The State Department is handling negotiations, Morrison continued. But the situation is complicated. The kidnappers are demanding the release of 3 high-value terrorists currently in U.S. custody. The president has made it clear that's not happening. I don't understand why you're telling me this, I said. Though a cold certainty was building in my chest, Morrison tapped the envelope. Because Admiral Kellerman specifically requested you for the rescue operation. The words hit me like a rogue wave, sudden and disorienting. That's impossible. I didn't complete training. I'm not a SEAL. No, she agreed. You're not. But you're the best damn marksman the Navy has produced in the last decade. Your scores during sniper training were unprecedented. Even our best operators couldn't match your precision at extreme range. Heat flooded my cheeks. It didn't matter. You said I wasn't ready. I said you weren't ready to be a SEAL, Morrison interrupted. And I was right. You lacked the mental fortitude for special operations at that time. The psychological evaluation was clear. You were carrying too much personal baggage to function effectively in a team environment. The old wounds tore open. With surgical precision. My father's death in Afghanistan when I was 16. The crushing weight of being the family's sole hope for redemption, for honor, for proving that immigrants could serve this country with distinction. The desperate need to validate his sacrifice by joining the most elite military unit in the world. But circumstances have changed, Morrison continued, seemingly oblivious to my internal collapse. This isn't about being a SEAL. This is about making one perfect shot from an impossible distance to save a good man's life. I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. What kind of shot? The intelligence community has located Admiral Kellerman. He's being held on a cargo ship anchored 12 nautical miles off the coast of Palawan. The kidnappers have made it clear that any attempt at a conventional rescue will result in his immediate execution. Morrison's voice took on the crisp, matter-of-fact tone she'd used during tactical briefings. However, our satellite reconnaissance has identified a narrow window of opportunity. Every morning at 0600 local time, they bring Admiral Kellerman topside for 30 minutes. Fresh air, exercise, basic maintenance to keep their asset alive. My mouth had gone dry. Range, 2,200 meters. From a concealed position. On the nearest island, 2,200 meters. Nearly a mile and a half. In sniper training, we'd practice shots out to 1,500 meters under ideal conditions. But 2,200 over open water, with a human life hanging in the balance, it's impossible, I whispered. That's what everyone said when you put 5 rounds through the same hole at 1,200 meters during training, Morrison replied. That's what they said when you hit a moving target at 1,600 meters in 30-knot crosswinds. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Kai, I've worked with every elite marksman in the U.S. military. I've seen Marine Scout snipers, Army, Rangers, Delta Force operators, the best of the best. None of them have your natural ability with a rifle. Natural ability didn't make me a SEAL. No, it didn't. But it might save Admiral Kellerman's life. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing against the research station's foundations. Outside, the fog was thickening, reducing visibility to just a few hundred yards. Perfect sniper weather, My instructor's voice whispered from memory. "Why me?" I asked finally. "There have to be active-duty snipers who could make this shot." Morrison's expression darkened. "The intelligence suggests this isn't a random kidnapping. Someone leaked the Admiral's exact location and schedule. Someone with access to classified operational details." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You think there's a mole?" "I know there's a mole. Which means we can't trust anyone in the normal chain of command. We need someone completely outside the system, someone with the skills, but without the current clearances or connections that could compromise the mission." She stood and walked back to the canyon photograph, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "I won't lie to you, Kai. This is a suicide mission. Even if you make the shot, getting off that island alive will be nearly impossible. The kidnappers will flood the area with search teams. The Philippine military might mistake you for a hostile. Hell, our own people might decide you're a loose end that needs cleaning up. Then why ask me?" Morrison turned back to face me, and for the first time since entering the room, her expression softened. "Because Admiral Kellerman is worth saving. Because he believed in you when others didn't. And because sometimes the person who fails becomes the only one who can succeed." She nodded toward the envelope. "Your plane leaves in 6 hours. Everything you need to know is in there: satellite photos, weather reports, equipment specifications. The rifle is already en route. I haven't said yes. Haven't you?" The truth was, I'd known from the moment she said Admiral Kellerman's name that I would go. The man had been one of only 3 instructors who'd treated me as a person rather than a failed experiment during SEAL training. When the psychological evaluation recommended my dismissal, he'd fought to keep me in the program. When Morrison made her final decision, Kellerman had pulled me aside afterward. "This isn't the end," he'd said quietly. "Your time will come." I reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. "There's something else," Morrison said as I broke. "The seal, the shot has to be perfect, not close perfect. Admiral Kellerman will be wearing an explosive vest. The trigger is biometric, keyed to his heart rate. If he dies from any cause other than the device being properly disarmed, it detonates. My blood turned to ice water. So if you miss, you don't just fail to save him, you kill him." The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. One shot, one chance. A man's life balanced on the edge of my ability to do something I'd never done before, under conditions I'd never faced, with stakes I'd never imagined. I opened the envelope and pulled out the mission brief. The first page showed a satellite image of a cargo ship anchored in crystal blue water. A small figure was visible on the deck: Admiral Kellerman, reduced to a few pixels of intelligence data, 20-200 meters away. "When do I leave?" I asked. Admiral Morrison's smile was grim but proud. "Welcome back to the fight, Chun." As I studied the mission parameters, one thought kept echoing in my mind. 3 years ago, I'd failed to become a Navy SEAL because I wasn't mentally strong enough to handle the pressure. Now, the pressure was about to become infinitely worse. And this time, there would be no second chances. The C-130 transport aircraft shuddered through turbulence as we approached the drop zone off the Philippine coast. I sat alone in the cargo bay, my hands steady despite the aircraft's violent motion. 24 hours ago, I'd been cataloging sea anemones. Now I was about to attempt the longest confirmed kill shot in military history. The mission briefing had been brutally simple. A Philippine fishing vessel would drop me on Malampaya Island at 0300 hours. I have 3 hours to reach the observation point, set up my equipment, and prepare for the shot. Admiral Kellerman would appear on the cargo ship's deck at exactly 0600. I'd have 1 bullet, 1 chance, and 30 seconds before the guards noticed he was down. Across from me sat Captain Marcus Webb, a weathered special operations veteran who'd volunteered to extract me after the shot. His presence was both reassuring and terrifying. If someone of his caliber considered this mission worth dying for, the stakes were even higher than I'd imagined. "First time back in the field?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the engines. "First time in the field, period," I replied. I never made it past training. Webb studied me with the calculating gaze of someone who'd sized up countless operators under fire. "Admiral Morrison says you can make shots other people only dream about. Under controlled conditions, on a range, ... I gestured vaguely at the chaos surrounding us. "You know what the difference is between a good sniper and a great one?" Webb asked. I shook my head. "A good sniper makes the shot when everything goes right. A great sniper makes the shot when everything goes wrong." The aircraft banked sharply and my stomach lurched. Through the small porthole, I could see the South China Sea stretching endlessly in all directions, moonlight painting silver paths. Across the water, somewhere out there, Admiral Kellerman was counting down his final hours. The loadmaster appeared, shouting over the engine noise. 10 minutes to drop. I checked my equipment one final time. The rifle case contained a modified Barrett M82A1, specially configured for extreme long-range precision. The ammunition was custom-loaded match-grade rounds, each one individually tested and certified. I had 5 bullets, total 4 for practice shots to zero the scope, and 1 for Admiral Kellerman. My hands found the small metal object in my pocket, my father's Purple Heart, awarded posthumously after an IED took his convoy in Helmand Province. I'd carried it through every challenge in my life, a reminder of the price of service and the weight of sacrifice. "He'd be proud," Webb said, noticing the gesture. "He'd be terrified," I corrected. He always said the worst part of being a soldier wasn't the dying, it was living with the consequences of missing when it mattered most. The fishing vessel Bagong Pag Isa waited in the pre-dawn darkness, its captain speaking rapid Tagalog with our pilot over radio. The transfer took less than 5 minutes, a Zodiac boat, a brief ride through choppy seas, and suddenly I was standing on the deck of a fishing boat that reeked of diesel fuel and dried fish. Captain Santos, a grizzled Filipino veteran, helped me secure my equipment. "American sniper?" he asked in heavily accented English, something like that. He grinned, revealing several missing teeth. "My son, he Marine. Fallujah, 2006. Good shooting." He pointed toward the dark outline of Malampaya Island. "You make good shooting too, yes?" The island was smaller than I'd expected from the satellite photos, maybe 2 kilometers long, covered in dense jungle except for a rocky outcropping on the northern shore. That was my destination, a natural shooting platform with clear lines of sight to the target area. Santos cut the engine as we approached the island's southern beach. "Current very strong here," he warned. "Must swim fast or rocks will ... He made a graphic gesture across his throat. I sealed my equipment in waterproof cases and slipped into the warm ocean water. The current immediately tried to drag me eastward, but years of competitive swimming had built the endurance I needed. 20 minutes later, I dragged myself onto a narrow beach, gasping and salt-blind but alive. The jungle was a maze of thorns and hanging vines, every step a battle against vegetation that seemed determined to slow my progress. Insects buzzed around my head in clouds, and something large crashed through the underbrush nearby, probably a wild pig. But my nerves interpreted every sound as a threat. It took 90 minutes to reach the observation point, 30 minutes longer than planned. Dawn was already painting the eastern horizon pale orange when I finally set up the rifle on its bipod, the barrel extending through a carefully constructed hide of branches and leaves. Through the scope, the cargo ship Mindanao Trader looked deceptively peaceful. 2,247 meters away, according to my laser rangefinder, slightly farther than the intelligence estimate. I could see movement on the deck as the crew prepared for their morning routine. The wind was the real enemy. Ocean winds were notoriously unpredictable, shifting direction and velocity without warning. At this range, a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind would push my bullet nearly 3 feet off target. I deployed a portable weather station and began taking readings every 30 seconds, building a mathematical model of the local conditions. Wind, 8 miles per hour from the southeast, gusting to 12. Temperature, 78 degrees Fahrenheit, rising. Humidity, 85%. Barometric pressure, 29.87 inches, and falling. Each variable affected the bullet's trajectory. I input the data into my ballistic calculator, making minute adjustments to the scope's elevation and windage turrets. At 2,247 meters, I was shooting beyond the effective range of the rifle, beyond the range where the manufacturer guaranteed accuracy. I chambered one of my practice rounds and aimed at a piece of debris floating near the ship. The .50 caliber bullet took nearly 3 seconds to cover the distance, and I watched through the scope as it impacted 6 inches low and 8 inches to the right of my point of aim. Adjustments. Another shot. Closer, but still not perfect. By 0545. I'd used 3 of my 4 practice rounds and achieved a grouping I could live with, all impacts within a 12-inch circle. For most purposes, that would be considered exceptional accuracy. For this mission, it was barely adequate. At 0555, activity on the ship's deck increased. 2 guards emerged from below, followed by a figure in naval dress whites, Admiral Kellerman. Even at this distance, I could see the explosive vest strapped to his chest, its LED display blinking red with each heartbeat. The Admiral looked older than his photographs, his once dark hair now mostly gray. But his bearing remained unmistakably military: straight spine, measured steps, eyes constantly assessing his surroundings for opportunities or threats. The guards positioned him near the ship's port rail, well within my line of sight. One of them spoke into a radio, probably reporting the prisoner's status to whoever was in charge below deck. I settled behind the rifle, my cheek pressed against the stock, my breathing slow and controlled. The scope's crosshairs bisected Admiral Kellerman's chest, just above the explosive device's central control unit. 2,247 meters. 1 shot, no margin for error. The wind had shifted again, now coming from due east at 6 miles per hour. I made a final adjustment to the windage, moving the crosshairs slightly left to compensate. Through my earpiece, Captain Webb's voice crackled. "Overwatch, this is Extract. Target is in position. You are cleared to engage." I took a deep breath, held it, and began the slow squeeze of the trigger that I'd practiced 10,000 times in training. The rifle's weight, the scope's magnification, the gentle pressure against my shoulder, everything felt familiar despite the alien circumstances. Halfway through the trigger pull, one of the guards stepped directly into my line of fire. I froze, finger motionless on the trigger. The guard was examining something on the ship's railing, his body blocking any shot at the Admiral. Seconds ticked by, precious time that I couldn't afford to lose. "Overwatch, what's your status?" Webb's voice was tense. "Blocked shot," I whispered into my microphone. "Standing by." The guard finally moved, stepping back to his original position. But now Admiral Kellerman had shifted as well, turning to look out over the water. Instead of facing me directly, he was now at a 45-degree angle. I had to recalculate everything. The angle would affect where the bullet struck the explosive vest, potentially missing the disarm mechanism entirely. Worse, the changed position meant I'd be shooting through the vest side panel, where the explosive charge was concentrated. My finger trembled on the trigger. If I missed the disarm switch by even an inch, the vest would detonate, killing Admiral Kellerman instantly and likely taking the guards with him. Through the scope, I saw the Admiral raise his hand to his forehead in what looked like a casual gesture. But I recognized it. He was shielding his eyes from the rising sun. trying to look directly at my position. Somehow he knew I was there, as if responding to an unheard command. Admiral Kellerman turned to face me directly, his body squared to my position. The explosive vest's central control unit was now perfectly visible. A small LED panel centered on his chest. The guards noticed his movement and barked orders in what sounded like Arabic. One of them grabbed the Admiral's arm, trying to turn him away from the rail. Now or never. I completed the trigger squeeze in one smooth motion. The rifle's report was deafening in the confined space of my hide, the muzzle blast sending a shower of leaves and debris into the air around me. Through the scope, I watched the bullet's impact in slow motion. The .50 caliber round struck the explosive vest's control panel dead center, the LED display sparking and going dark. Admiral Kellerman staggered backward from the impact but remained standing. The guards reacted with confusion. Rather than alarm, the bullet had struck silently from their perspective, and the vest's deactivation wasn't immediately obvious. It took them several seconds to realize what had happened. By then, Admiral Kellerman was already moving. The man who'd seemed frail and defeated moments before exploded into action, using his military training to maximum advantage. He grabbed the nearest guard's weapon, twisted it away, and drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus. The second guard raised his rifle, but Admiral Kellerman was already diving for cover behind a shipping container. The deck erupted in automatic weapons fire as more hostiles poured out of the ship's interior. "Extract, this is Overwatch," I radioed. "Target is mobile. Vest is deactivated. You are clear for pickup." Webb's response was immediate. "Copy, Overwatch. Helicopter is inbound to your position. Time to go." I broke down the rifle with practiced efficiency, stuffing components into my pack as the sound of rotors grew louder in the distance. Through my scope's discarded position, I could see muzzle flashes on the cargo ship as Admiral Kellerman fought his way toward the vessel's far side. The extraction helicopter, a Kadzia, Philippine Air Force UH-1 Huey, appeared over the jungle canopy, its door gunner already scanning for threats. I popped smoke to mark my position and prepared for the most dangerous part of any sniper mission, getting out alive. The Huey's skids touched down on the rocky outcropping, just long enough for me to throw my equipment aboard and dive through the open door. We were airborne again in seconds, climbing steeply as small arms fire erupted from the ship below. "Beautiful shot," Webb shouted over the rotor noise. "Clean kill on the vest's control system from 2,200 meters." Through the helicopter's window, I could see a Philippine Navy patrol boat racing toward the cargo ship, its deck gun already training on target. Whatever happened next, Admiral Kellerman would have backup, but as we flew away from Malampaya Island, I found myself thinking not about the shot I'd made, but about the moment when Admiral Kellerman had turned to face me directly. Somehow, despite being a prisoner, despite the explosive vest, despite the guards, he'd positioned himself to give me the best possible target. Even under the most desperate circumstances, he'd found a way to help complete the mission. 3 hours later, I sat in a debriefing room at Clark Air Base, still wearing salt-stained fatigues and jungle camouflage. Admiral Morrison entered with a tablet computer and expression I couldn't read. "Admiral Kellerman?" I asked immediately. "Safe," she replied. "The Philippine Navy secured the vessel 40 minutes after your shot. 3 hostiles killed, 2 captured. The Admiral has some bruises and dehydration, but he's alive." Relief flooded through me so completely that I had to grip the table's edge to stay upright. "The explosive vest?" I asked. Morrison smiled for the first time since I'd known her, completely neutralized. "The armorer said your bullet severed the main control circuit and damaged the primary detonator. Even if someone had tried to trigger it manually, the device was inoperative." She set the tablet on the table and turned it toward me. The screen showed a video feed Admiral Kellerman in a hospital bed, surrounded by medical staff but clearly conscious and alert. He asked me to give you this, Morrison said, touching the tablet screen. Admiral Kellerman's recorded voice filled the room. Kai, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I wanted you to know that shot was impossible. Absolutely impossible. And you made it anyway. His voice was hoarse but steady. 3 years ago, I told you your time would come. I was right. The recording ended, leaving silence in the sterile debriefing room. What happens now? I asked. Morrison studied me with the same intensity she'd shown during SEAL training. But now there was something different in her expression, respect, maybe even admiration. That depends, she said. The Pentagon is very interested in your capabilities. There are programs, positions, opportunities for someone with your skills. You could write your own ticket in military special operations. I thought about the offer, about the life I'd dreamed of as a Navy SEAL, about redemption and second chances. Then I thought about the Marine Research Station, about the quiet satisfaction of cataloging life forms that existed in the deep ocean's crushing darkness. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. Morrison nodded as if she'd expected that answer. The research station could use better security consulting. The Navy has ongoing contracts with marine biology programs. There might be ways to overlap our interests. The suggestion was delicate but clear. I could return to my civilian life while remaining available for missions like this one. The best of both worlds. I'd like that, I said. As I prepared to leave Clark Air Base, Captain Webb found me in the departure lounge. Hell of a shot, he said simply. Hell of a team, I replied. He handed me a small wooden box. From Admiral Kellerman. He said you'd understand. Inside the box was a single .50 caliber bullet, identical to the one I'd fired except for an engraving along its case. The impossible shot, K Chun minus 2,247 meters. Below that, in smaller letters, your time came. 6 months later, I stood in the same laboratory where Admiral Morrison had first found me, cataloging specimens from a deep-sea exploration. The work was still methodical, still peaceful, still exactly what I needed. But now twice a week, I drove to a private range in the mountains above Monterey. I practiced shots at extreme distances, maintaining skills I hoped never to use again, but knew I must keep sharp, because somewhere in the world, someone else might need an impossible shot. And sometimes, the person who fails at one thing becomes the only one who can succeed at another. The brass bullet sat on my desk, beside my father's Purple Heart, 2 reminders that service takes many forms, and that redemption often comes when we least expect it. I'd failed to become a Navy SEAL, but I'd saved a good man's life with a single perfect shot. Some failures, I'd learned, are just preparation for a different kind of success. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.